Well, we saw on Thursday what the Big Ten did with its 2024 and 25 schedules. Now, this, for those of you who don't know, that's the first year the Big Ten will have UCLA and USC in their conference. And when you look at what the league did and compare it or think about what the SEC is going to do a week in a week, I think you can learn a lot from these games. For instance, from what the Big Ten has put out there, because you've got your major brands, and the biggest two brands in the Big Ten are Ohio State and Michigan. The addition of USC and UCLA doesn't change that. Well, the biggest two um, brands in the SEC are Alabama and Georgia. Just after Ohio State and Michigan, you've got Penn State and probably USC. In the SEC, you've got LSU and probably at that point Texas. So what you're going to do is you're going to schedule basically everything around those four teams. I'll say this. Unlike the Big Ten, the SEC has more than just a few top teams. I mean, when you look at the Big Ten, Michigan State is a team that has done really well over time, but they're not. I mean, they're not a great program, generally speaking, over time. I mean, they're good, but you know, they're probably worse than Auburn, to be honest with you. So they're somewhere in that universe. But you've got schools that draw like Florida, Texas A&M. And now Oklahoma, which is a huge TV brand, whether we realize it or not. All those schools will be the spotlight schools. So in the Big Ten, what they decided to do was they said, okay, Michigan and Michigan State, they're going to play. That's just all there is to it. Ohio State and Michigan, they're going to play. That's all there is to it. But they, from what I can tell, they didn't saddle Ohio State with someone else, because they're going to want Ohio State to play Penn State, UCLA, and USC in a 3-year period. UCLA and so SC UCLA, they're going to play every season like they always do. Ohio State, same thing with Michigan. So your biggest game of college football, Ohio State, Michigan, that's not going to change, obviously. And they're trying to develop these rivalries like Nebraska and Iowa, games people just don't care about, to be honest with you. Illinois, Northwestern. I mean, the SEC has those too. It's just, to me, the SECs are more fun and quirky. I'll tell you that. Hey, I've got this shirt on, which I've not worn in a while. I'll link that down below if you like it. You can order that. Make sure you're picking up our 2023 preview. You can pick it up from Red Zone. That's where the shirt's from. Also, when you order Double Dogs, you get the magazine for free. So take advantage of those things today. What I think we're going to see from the league next week, and now this is coming out on Wednesday, okay? I think you're going to see, just like the Big Ten did, you're going to stack big-name opponents against one another. The other thing to remember, too, is that this is a one-off season. This doesn't mean anything compared to what, I mean, it doesn't have to match 2023, and it doesn't have to match 2025. So if the SEC ever wanted to, quote, do anything, this was the year to do it. They wanted to, make up Ole Miss, Alabama going to Ole Miss 2 years in a row. They can't do that with Georgia Auburn because, it's a home game for Georgia against Auburn in 24. If it were an away game, I think it'd be a different ball game. But just little quirks in the schedule that happened 10 years ago or so, that would be the time to do it. I think if you're going to establish, I don't know about rivalries, if you're going to establish yearly games like Texas A&M, or Texas, Arkansas, now is probably the time to do it. I mean, Texas is probably the trickiest thing of all here. For Georgia, in 24, it's not going to really make it. They're always going to play Florida just the same way Texas is always going to play Oklahoma, and Alabama is always going to play Auburn, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. You get the point. I think the trickier thing, and 24 will shed light on this for the league as we move forward, is who would the secondary rivalries be, so to speak? Georgia's really only secondary rivalry in the SEC by that definition is Auburn. Um, Obviously Georgia has three rivals. Alabama has three rivals, but those rivalries don't all match up. Like for instance, Georgia Auburn, their rivalries match up. Excuse me, I'm gonna sneeze. Well, maybe not, but but Alabama's rivalries they don't match up. For instance, you could really make the argument that Tennessee Alabama, that's Tennessee's biggest rivalry in the SEC. You can make the argument. That wasn't always. I don't know. That's so strange. But Georgia Auburn, Alabama's biggest rivalry is Auburn. Georgia's is Florida, and their second biggest in the league are one another. It's Deep South rivalry. So you've got, those are easy. Most of the rivalries are not. You sit there, you talk about Ole Miss LSU. That's a rivalry for sure. They just don't match each other necessarily. I mean, they both have a bigger rival, but Alabama's biggest rival is not LSU. And so the league has tried to, I wouldn't say shove together some games, but Arkansas, Missouri, that's shoved together. To some degree, LSU, Texas A&M, two teams that have hardly ever played each other in history. If I remember correctly, certainly not on a yearly basis when A&M was in the SWAC, or it was in the Southwest Conference. That seems shoved together. This is not a rivalry, but South Carolina plays Texas A&M every single year. I don't know, and so you're trying to get these games, and it's been tricky. But I was going to say Saturday. This coming Wednesday will show better kind of what we're at. In the 80s, I will say this: in the 80s, from 1986 until 1995, Texas A&M and LSU played every year. Obviously, when the league split into divisions, that's when that thing kind of died, and they didn't play for almost 15 years after that. But they played more than I suspected they did. But is that a rivalry? I mean, I don't really think so, but that's me. But they are close to one another. I mean, it's probably a lot like Georgia, South Carolina. Another game. 2024 will be most interesting. So in the Big Ten, what they did was they said to Penn State, okay, in 24, you're going to play Michigan State, Ohio State, SC, and you're playing all of them at home. You're going on the road to Wisconsin. So they have sort of four legitimate games, if you want to call it that. In 25, they will host UCLA. They will go to Michigan, Michigan State, and USC. So they're giving them four legitimate games. What's going to be curious is what happens with the games like Georgia, South Carolina, and Georgia, Tennessee. I mean, I've talked about this a lot, but those games, Georgia, Tennessee for sure, was shoved together because of divisions. Georgia and Tennessee hardly played each other, even though they were in the same league. I mean, you go from 1981 until 1988 and 9. I can't remember. Yeah, 1988. So they would go a decade and play like four times. It was not an annual thing like it's become. Georgia, South Carolina, they did play more often because Georgia played Clemson and South Carolina and Georgia Tech every year for decades. So that game's a little different. But we will see what happens, with those types of games, with Auburn, Texas A&M, with, nobody cares about Missouri. I'm not going to talk about them. With Arkansas, Ole Miss. Will games that are sort of not primetime affairs, which of those games will stick around too? As a person who really watches this league a lot, when you compare it to what the Big Ten's got, even with the addition of SC and UCLA, I mean, listen to some of these games. I mean, they're just tragic, okay? And this is going to happen with the SEC too. But look at look at SC's 2024 schedule. Man, I would not want to cover SC. Think about all these flights. So these are some of the, I'll name the great games, the games that people will actually be like, oh, okay. So SC Michigan in California, people are going to love that game. SC UCLA, yes, people love that. SC Penn State, that's like an old Rose Bowl, or the same thing like the SC Michigan game. But no one's going to get turned on by SC Iowa, SC Illinois. Certainly no one cares about any game that Maryland plays. You could say the same thing about Northwestern and Purdue. They just don't care. They don't matter. And so, in this league, I don't know that you can say that as much. I would definitely say no one cares about Georgia, Missouri. No one cares about Vanderbilt, Georgia. Very few people care about Georgia, Kentucky. After that, though, when you think about last season's schedule, okay? And let me get to it because sometimes I forget it. A season ago, Georgia opened the season at South Carolina, which people cared about. Missouri, no. Auburn, yeah. Vanderbilt, no. Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky, I already kind of explained, and Mississippi State, But there's more, it's about, I think the difference is that the rivalries in the SEC, I'm not sure there's more of them. It's just a more fun league. No one's ever going to watch Missouri. Like, that's a game that never matters to anybody. It's cute that they put them on Friday with Arkansas. Arkansas can't care about that game. Their home is in Texas with the old Southwest Conference. They were never in the Big Eight with Missouri. So there's going to be 2 former Big Eight schools that are going to be in the SEC in the future. One of them people are going to care about, which is Oklahoma. The addition of Oklahoma, which is viewed as a football school, same way as Texas, that will enhance the SEC. It feels like, looking at these schedules, and I'll read off UCLA's real quick, because UCLA's are not the end of the world. They host SC at the Rose Bowl. Then they play Ohio State. I think people still value Nebraska, but it is not a great school in terms of football right now. And then Michigan. Do people care about Rutgers, Indiana, Northwestern, and Minnesota? They definitely don't. I would give Iowa an incomplete. No one, and you know what? No one cares about Iowa either. Let's just be honest. Let's just call it what it is. They're not good. They're boring. How many of these games would you really watch? Be honest. Iowa, Nebraska. You're going to watch that. And here's why. It's on a Friday after Thanksgiving. So you got Iowa, Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin, Iowa, UCLA, Iowa, Maryland. The answer to those 3 is no. Iowa, Minnesota, no. Iowa, Illinois. I bet some people don't know where Illinois is. They don't even know how to pronounce the state's name. Iowa, Ohio State, people will watch that because of Ohio State. Iowa, Rutgers, 100% no. That game's going to be on Peacock. Iowa, USC, no. Well, I'll give you Iowa, USC just because it's SC, and that's it. But and one last thing on this rant, okay? If you are SC and you are you're traveling to Penn State, Maryland, Northwestern, and Purdue, those are all minimum 4-hour flights. Some of those are longer than that. That is insane. There are only 3 months in a football season. One of these months, SC is going to be doing a double trip across the country. That is serious commitment for money. But I think this weekend, this week, when we watch the SEC, figure everything out, we'll finally know a lot of different stuff. I'm going to be very curious to see what they do with Georgia, Carolina, and Georgia, Tennessee.